ROI comes into play with respect to when you stake versus when it ends, right? And this is what Patrick, aka Hexline from Crypto Sparbuck, actually pointed out to me last week. We had a chat about this, and this is when it became apparent to me. But the thing that I'm just not clear on yet, and this is what I want to touch on in a little bit, is how the big payday, because the big payday stakes, right? The stakes that were put in before big payday, they're going to have a bigger ROI than just what you get from the normal math.
But that's not going to affect the math, because that was an airdrop on top of your shares are all that matters in the ROI math, right?
That's true. That's true. That's true. It's the T shares. That's right. That's right.
It's just the T shares, because that is actually extra HEX that is dropped into your bag.
Correct. It is not extra T share, so it does not affect the T share.
So I asked this same question to Kyle, and Wales, you're spot on. His answer was, I don't think in our lifetime. So he doesn't think in our lifetime there's going to be a better ROI than those early stakes that come off in 15 years.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's not about, like, I gave a very non-mathematical answer, but it is really the math. It's the power law. And the thing about it is that the power law always start, and this is why you buy HEX now and not later, right? This is why you bought Bitcoin at 0, not at $1, not at 10, not at 1,000, because the earlier you adopt, the greater the ROI.
And that's because of your share price at the time you got it, right?
Well, that's yes. Yeah, that's a function of it, but that function is strictly for HEX, though. I'm speaking in a very generic sense, because the earliest adopters, if you think about it, right, the earliest adopters are typically VC funds. And why is that? Because they get in at microscopic prices. Right?
But that's philosophy. I'm talking about the math of HEX itself, because
but it's related. It's related. Think about it. How much does HEX cost? A HEX costs less than a cent.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're picking up $1,000 worth of HEX, you're picking up more than a round number. You're picking up a round number plus some. So that gives you a little more leverage when you think about it. So when that value goes up, you put down $1,000. So how the story ends is that the greater the ROI you experience from the system, the greater the factor that the T-share is going to be divided by on the next round. And this is why when you have a big ROI, you can't generate the same number of T-shares the second time around. That's the only reason why. So if you have... Let's say, go ahead.
So let me back into that real quick.
Sure.
ROI doesn't matter if I staked 1 billion HEX or 1 million HEX.
It's how long.
If I got more ROI on my 1 million HEX, that 1 billion HEX isn't going to move it. If he only staked 1 billion HEX for 6 months, that's not going to change it. But my 1 million HEX at 15 years is going to change.
That's going to change it, right? Because again, the quantity of shares that we get is a function of two things: the size of the shares that we have in conjunction with the length of time for which we hold those shares. It's very important.
And the cost of those shares when they were purchased, which of course the best price was day
at that
one.
point in time. Well, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Well, actually, that's a good point to bring up, RG. Was it really day one, or was it a few days in after price dropped? Because T-shares went lower after day one. Or are we going to go just by the T-share rate?
Right? I think you're going to go by the T-share rate, because it
has to be day one.
Yeah, because that's all that matters. I mean, T-shares have been going, below the dollar.
We're working at ROI, not on USD. We're working it out in HEX.
Yeah,
that's right. In HEX. Okay. Then that's fair enough.
Because it's always going to, saying that, T-shares go up in price really isn't correct, because the dollar is going to, it's value to the dollar. And you show this all the time in your,
that's like saying
the value to the dollar is always going up and down.
Yeah.
As it's moving up and to the right, it's still, dipping below it. I mean, it'll have a different price dollar wise,
but that doesn't matter.
But that doesn't matter, because the T-share rate is always,
the T-share rate, correct. It's just a matter of the differential in the quantity of HEX that you're using to stake versus not, one day versus the other. That's really it. So
So Kyle went on to say, at some point in the distant future, the inflation payments could be crazy enough to beat it.
Yeah.
So, but that's after we're dead. 'Cause he
Yeah,
said
that's
not-
a long
he
time
doesn't think in
away.
our lifetime.
Right,
So,
because it's gonna be like the Bitcoin halvings, right? They decrease over time to a point where they come negligible, and just a regular inflation rate, whatever it is in the system. I don't know Bitcoin like that, but whatever the regular inflation rate is in the system, because it has to be one, right? There has to be some kind of inflation, and that's gonna always exist as long as there's an ability for the system to reduce its mining blocks, right? And that's the thing. I think if I remember correctly, it goes out to like 140 years from the start, and that's a long time, right? So then what happens then is that over time, you have all these institutions entering Bitcoin now, but what they haven't done the math. They're just going to the brightest star in the sky for now, not realizing that even stars do come to an end. Right? Even a bright star in the sky has an end. Like everything is finite. So, now it's Hex's time. Hex is 0. And Hex has to jump to 10, 20, 30, 40, just like everything else, because it's a network. The T shares are already at $100 plus, right? And last year it was at $1 or less. So
Okay.
Hex has a lot of catching up to do. And this is what people don't understand.